In mathematics and probability, they say that if you give 1,000,000 monkeys 1,000,000 typewriters and they bang on them for 1,000,000 years, they'll recreate the collected works of Shakespeare. We gave 4 squirrels an Etch-a-Sketch, and they gave us Trekosophy. Good afternoon, folks, and welcome to Trekosophy, the literary edition. Joining me today in studio, our technical guru, the guy who's got digital access to all written works of humanity for the entire course of human history. It's Chris McGee.
And it all fits on my iPad, too.
And our fearless leader, the man who ghost wrote his own autobiography, it's Ben McLean.
Narcissism in written form.
And I am Bill Allen, a.k.a. the guy in the red shirt, and this is Trekosophy. And we've got a special treat for you tonight, folks. Today, we're doing an interview with critically acclaimed author B.T. Kirby to talk about his new book, Faith and the Final Frontier. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Kirby.
Thanks for having me. That was fun.
Yes, I acclaimed him critically.
I did too. Actually, my review just went live on Amazon. So he he's been
so he really is critically acclaimed.
Yeah.
See, I wasn't sure if I could get away with that because, I mentioned in the
I didn't get to do it yet. So here's my critical acclamation. Good for you, you bastard.
Well, you got a dedication, Ben.
Oh, right. Maybe that doesn't quite count then.
It's underhanded dedication.
One of the most fulfilling moments in my life, seeing my name in print in a book. Wow.
There you go.
Your second grade teacher would be so proud.
Honest to goodness, it was. I couldn't have dedicated it to anyone else. This coming here is the highlight of my week. I always have fun.
She would be like, your second grade teacher. She'd be like, all those 7 years you were in her class were so worth it.
Okay.
Okay, enough with the jokes. I'm sorry.
All right.
It's a good thing it's not Stephen King. We'd be in trouble now.
So if you haven't heard, folks, basically Brandon has just now published a book called Faith in the Final Frontier, an exploration of Christian philosophy through Star Trek.
That's the one.
So write it now and get it. No. Well, yes, but anyway. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the book, Mr. Kirby?
Well, I suppose I could tell you where it started. If you want to understand a thing, you have to understand its causes. Bit Aristotelians here. I was listening to a lecture by Peter Kraft, and he was bringing up that tension that we've often talked about before on the podcast. And he was talking about that tension between logic and desire, doing what our minds tell us to do and doing what our passions tell us to do, and how they often conflict. And he was drawing parallels in the history of philosophy, and so much of philosophy is discussing that point, especially in ethics. And he drew the parallel with Star Trek between the logical Mr. Spock and the loving Dr. McCoy, and then there's Captain Kirk who has to synthesize the two. It made me think about some of the philosophical underpinnings of Star Trek, and I had that in my mind. But at the time, I was writing a book called Rational God, where it was very much what DePaul was talking about when she had to explain her religious beliefs. She said something effective. Our beliefs are based on logic and the clarity of thought. And I was like, okay, well, what would a Vulcan religion look like? And I tried to draw together some elements from what they had discussed in the show, and there wasn't a whole lot there, but I just was playing around with that thought in my mind. At the same time, I was watching an episode of The Next Generation where Worf was trying to teach Alexander ethics. And we all know the callous Vulcan utilitarian ethics.
Kind of like Aristotle and another Alexander.
Well, there you go, yeah. Maybe Aristotle could have done a better job there, but be that as it may, Worf's trying to teach Alexander ethics, and he does so through a story where it's exciting. It speaks to our passions. It's not methodical. It's not the rational proposition that you get with the Vulcans. It's that same tension. And so I started to think, okay, what's going on in Klingon religion? And played around with the idea, toyed with the idea about writing a book on the subject. Didn't think much of it until about 2 years later, about 2 years later, I was watching an episode of Deep Space Nine, and Ducat gave that wonderful speech that should be headlining any class on Nietzsche, where he converted Kaiwin, the Pope of the Bajoran religion, to worship their devils and not their gods. And the thrust of the speech was, when you have to pretend to be something you're not to be religious, you have to pretend to be humble. That's not who you are. That's not what you desire. That's a facade. You're a fake. Be who you really are. You desire power. Seek after power. There's nothing wrong with that. That's who you are. And I thought that was so brilliant. It was so Nietzschean. It immediately brought me back to the book idea I had with Klingon religion and Vulcan religion. I said, okay, well, if I'm going to write a book that has elements of the original series and Klingons and Vulcans and now Deep Space Nine, I've just got to cover the whole of Star Trek. Mm-hmm. And I was in the mood to write it. I had just finished a book. It was a commentary on Augustine's City of God, which is a 1,200-page beast, and Augustine himself is an enlightened thinker. So I was in the mood to have some fun, sit down, and just really enjoy writing the book. So
this wasn't your first book then, huh?
So you have other books.
I have other books. It's the first one that I did publish, though.
Oh, the first published book.
Oh, okay.
I've just got that sitting on my hard drive. Put it away if anybody asks for it.
Oh.
Need to finish it and publish it. But anyway.
Well, I gotta say, I enjoyed reading your book because it, as a guy who's more into the Trek than the Osophy, although I do the Osophy side of things too, it's a great primer for anybody who wants to get started in philosophy, because you don't get too heavy with it, you don't get too dry. You start with a Star Trek story and people go, hey, I know that story. And then you bring up the philosophical commentary on that, and you make references to other stuff, so if people want to go look deeper into it, they can. But you keep each individual chapter, it's like an essay unto itself, each little, and you keep it short, you keep it sweet, it's concise. And I'm spending 10 minutes talking about how brevity is a good thing, so you can see it's something I lack, but you've mastered the knack for it.
Well, I was going for that. I mean, a book on Star Trek and philosophy, it's supposed to, if anything, introduce religious people to philosophy and maybe introduce Star Trek people to religious philosophy.
Yeah.
It's an introduction. It's not meant to be the Summa Theologica. It's not meant to be a critique of pure reason. It's just meant to get people interested. It's meant to pique your interest. It's not something that's you're going to have to sit down. It's going to take the full power of your intellect to read. It's something that you can sit down and have some fun with.
Well, with my intellect, it definitely takes the full power of it to read it.
Well, like with anything, what level you're on will determine how easy or hard it is. I think it's a good. Well, I think what you're doing is great. I think you assume some familiarity with the great books that a lot of undergraduate philosophy students are going to already have, but which some of the general public might not already have. But you also, at the same time, include enough information and sort of context clues that they can generally follow the thread of the conversation for the most part, even if they haven't read all the books they need to read or even looked at the cliff notes that they need to look at. Does that make sense?
Well, it does. And like any other book, there's going to be layers in terms of what you take out of it.
I mean, I still think people need to read Plato to get started in philosophy, really. Or, at least to make some attempt at reading some of the easier Platonic dialogues. But, if they've done that and they've sort of maybe watch some YouTube to get some general gist, then they're definitely ready for your book. You know what I mean?
agree. Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, if somebody's familiar with the debate between rationalism and empiricism, they might pluck a little bit more out of it. But if you're not, you're still likely to follow exactly not exactly what's going on, but you're not going to be confused.
You kind of get a general gist or attitude in any case.
I did have some non-philosophers read it before I put it up on Amazon, and they seemed to enjoy the book, and I asked them for some feedback just to see if they actually got a lot of the ideas from it, and they did. So that was, I mean, you're going to see a lot more going on if you're familiar with the whole history of philosophy, for sure. But even if you're not, I think you're going to get exactly what I'm saying.
Sure. What would you say is your main thesis?
Don't have one.
Really?
Honest to goodness, there's no logical structure to it. There's no rhyme or reason.
Well, according to the subtitle, it says exploration of Christian philosophy through Star Trek. So it seems like you're trying to sort of tie those two together, seeing where Star Trek explores Christianity in a roundabout way, perhaps.
Well, yeah, that's certainly legitimate, Chris. But if you think of Christian philosophy, you have to think in terms of the existence of God, of grace, of Christ, and those aren't really central. You won't find those taking up the bulk of what the book is about. They're there. I mean, anyone who's a Christian is invariably going to mention Christ at some point, or sin. But I mean, it's in the book. It's just not a central theme. So it's a hodgepodge. It's a collection of the nature of the soul. Why? What about pain? Would God be right to remove our pain? Was Cybok right to do it?
Mm-hmm.
What constitutes a person? Probably the most prevalent theme would be what birthed the idea in the first place, and that was the tension between logic and desire.
That's what I was kind of fishing for when I asked what your main thesis was. I expected to get something about that. reason and love, or logic and desire, or whatever.
Well, it's what comes up the most in the book.
Yeah, it does.
But I can also see why he'd want to avoid saying it has a theme, because he didn't want to start this with some kind of notion and then try to make the facts fit the notion. He just wanted to look at all the bits and pieces and kind of let people build their own picture from the jigsaw puzzle.
Exactly. That's exactly it. I mean, the truth is, Ben, it's a prevalent topic that I cover in the book. But if you notice, I don't really take a side, and I don't really offer anything valid in terms of a synthesis. So if that was a thesis, it was a very poorly done thesis. So I don't want to.
Wait, I thought you were advocating Chesterton's synthesis of the red and white together thing.
Sure, but that's not going to keep the Vulcans very happy. And there are definite times in which in my own life and in my own thinking, I probably lean in that direction. The logic is supreme and desire secondary.
Wait, what?
But I bring that up in the book. There is such a thing as a synthesis. People do go around saying, well, the debate between faith and works, for example, they're both of equal importance. C.S. Lewis says the debate between which one's more important is akin to the debate between which blade on a pair of scissors is most important. It's a silly debate, and that's another. That's something else.
Well, yeah, but the evangelicals hate him for that passage. When anyone brings it up, because they want to say that works are completely unnecessary, while other groups, Catholics, Latter-day Saints, Wesleyans, will say that you need both in different. The disagreements are fairly minor outside of the idea that you don't need works at all, which is the Protestant idea.
Yeah, there's a plethora of views, and I try to give a fair hearing to all of them. I mean, I was once teaching a Sunday school class, and somebody came up to me afterwards and they thanked me for giving the Catholic perspective, because I'd never heard the Catholic perspective. I said, I'm not Catholic. I don't even have sympathies for the Catholic Church. What are you talking about? I said, well, the way you presented them made me think you were a Catholic. Well, it wasn't intentional. So, I mean, if something did come out stronger than something else in the book, it wasn't intentional.
Yeah, I did that at my church just a few weeks ago. I think it made everybody really uncomfortable.
I know. And the only thing to do is to sit back and laugh and let everyone be uncomfortable.
Yeah, I guess.
All right. I mean, we've still got a few more questions, but, you know, I want to ask one. What's up with the cat? Throughout the book, not throughout in every single essay, but in a few instances, you look at Star Trek, and then you look at the philosophical concept Star Trek is exemplifying or presenting, and then for a real world example to relate this so that people can understand it, it's your cat.
The irony is I'm not a cat person. I can only recall one instance in which I brought the cat up, to be perfectly honest with you. I do remember pointing out that she has the ability to do basic syllogisms. She can reason. And so if you want to talk about what a person is, when you're talking about is the doctor a person, is Data a person, do they have a soul? Well,
Yeah.
that was the big one, but I as I'm reading through it, it's like it got mentioned a couple more times here and there. Just it wasn't as in depth, but that cat kept showing up.
You know what
I
it
only
is?
counted it twice. Once when you're talking about how a cat understands logic, because when
In a primitive
you,
sense.
yeah, poke your head out of the room, she pokes her head up to see if it's your wife, and it's not. And the second one was when talking about saving your cat from a burning building. If the cat belonged to a pretty girl, your
yes.
mother might question your motive.
Right. I remember that. Talking about motivations. It's not a pious act. And that was an important point with the Klingons, where it was the heart that matters. It's not the consequence of the action. And I sincerely hope that later on we do an episode for rules of engagement with Deep Space Nine, where the magistrate was a utilitarian ethic Vulcan, and the Klingon was a Kantian duty, honor-based in his philosophy, and was really only concerned with Worf's motivation. I
honestly laughed out loud when you got to that that passage, because you actually made me realize something I hadn't realized before from having watched the episode about 3 or 4 times, and that is that.
Would you want to explain what the passage is so that our listeners?
Oh, I thought he just did.
He did. I'm sorry.
Well, we'll give a context for it. Worf is being put on trial because he had attacked a ship that was a civilian ship. Now, in the battle, he was fighting some Klingons, and there was one particular ship that decloaked that was a Klingon ship, and he said, fire, but he didn't, and he wound up blowing the ship up. But he didn't bother to check to see what sort of ship it was. He just heard it was a Klingon ship. Boom, they're dead. And as it turns out, it was a civilian transport. And then as the episode progresses, Worf was actually being set up by the Klingons. There was no civilians on board the transport. They had put that ship there in the battle specifically in an attempt to disgrace the Klingon Starfleet officer. And they wanted him out of the picture because obviously he's going to be able to offer insights to Starfleet on how to fight Klingons, this, that, and the other thing. And the Vulcan magistrate, who's a utilitarian, needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, and says, oh, okay, well, there were no ill consequences to his action. And so he didn't do anything wrong, case closed. Well, the Klingon lawyer had effectively made his case. He had shown that Worf really was in the heat of the moment. He was angry with other Klingons. He was bloodthirsty. He wanted to get revenge. None of this is compatible with effective leadership under the Starfleet code of conduct. And so, in terms of how a Kantian would feel about the case that the Klingon had made, he said, case closed. Worf is guilty. But if you're a utilitarian, where the consequences all that matters, then Worf hadn't done anything wrong. And now you've got a debate.
Yeah, and what made me laugh about that is that you took that toad of a lawyer at face value, as though he's actually articulating an ideology, where I thought he was just BSing everyone.
Rewatch the episode where he talks about what's in Worf's heart.
Oh, you're right. It's just that it had never occurred to me before.
Yeah, I thought there was a definite ideology behind it.
Yeah, I mean, I thought he was just making crap up,
Well, to a Klingon, it wouldn't matter. Worf wasn't being honorable at the time. Regardless of the consequences, Worf wasn't the one being honorable. I mean, think back to when Riker was, this was in the book also, when Riker was a first officer aboard a Klingon ship during their exchange program. He couldn't betray his honor to Starfleet and help them attack the Enterprise. And then the Klingon captain said, well, I respect you for that, because if you had been dishonorable, I would have killed you. He was more interested in Riker's own personal honor and his own motivation rather than the consequence, because if Riker would have helped him, the Klingon captain would have been this great warrior who defeated Picard and brought down the flagship of the Federation. We didn't get any of that glory, and it's because Riker was honorable and he respected the honor. Klingons respect your heart and your motivation.
Yeah.
They're Kantian.
Yeah, I mean, it makes a lot of sense, but I don't think anyone else has probably ever gone that deep into the analysis of that trial scene, and that was really great. Have we done an episode on that yet?
Well,
Not
if we
yet.
haven't, we're going to.
We need to next week do
We're
that.
going to be
Add
stealing
it to our
so
list on the
many.
document.
We're going to be stealing a lot of ideas for future episodes from this book because
Hope you don't mind, Brandon.
Go for
Well, it works both ways, because some of what's in the book is
Yeah, we've actually
stuff
covered
that
a couple
Brandon
of
said on Trekosophy already.
Right.
Yeah, I usually have my book open. I'll quote a passage every now and then, and sometimes I'm not even vocalizing that it's a passage from my book. I just look the thoughts.
there are a lot of things in this book. I mean, we all know that there are some underlying moral and philosophical points being made by Star Trek, but this book in particular is a unique analysis of those points, and a lot of times it's pointing out something that at first glance we might not have thought was a philosophical point. And it's like, no, the philosophy is everywhere, all through it, even in spots we don't think. One of my personal favorite essays was the Galileo 7 and Pascal's wager.
Yes.
Just the whole explanation of how, I mean, originally when you watch the episode, it's showing that, at least what I took away from it is that it's not logic alone that makes someone a good leader. There's more to it than that. It was about leadership. But you point out that it's about that leap of faith. It's about that Pascal's wager. You know, there's a time when the emotional outburst is the logical thing to do.
Yeah, that episode I thought was perfect. I mean, you could write a month's worth of sermons based on that episode. It was one of my favorite of the original series, and I had to include the book.
And if they actually did a sermon on the Galileo 7 and Pascal's wager, I would probably go to church.
I think that's actually been done. I'm not kidding. I'm pretty sure that's been done in some of those bigger, or in some churches.
Well, the point is, I mean, if you're a rationalist, where everything has to be justified, and everything has to be calculated, and everything has to be reasonable, you're not going to go anywhere. One, you probably don't have any content for your calculations. You're counting numbers that go on up to infinity that add to nothing meaningful. Aside from not having anything to be passionate about or any goal that you're going towards, it's not even practical. It's not even reasonable to be completely reasonable. And that's what I think the episode was trying to convey. there reaches a point where doing the irrational thing is actually doing the rational thing, and that's the paradox. It's Kierkegaardian in that sense, where we necessarily have to leave our reasonings behind at some point, and reason compels us to do that. Thomas Aquinas, I think, said it best when he said, love takes over where reason leaves off. Reason will take you so far, but this far and no further. The line has to be drawn here. And I think that was the message of the show. I didn't think I was reading into it, but maybe I was a bit.
I think it pretty much that is pretty much what Spock said at the end of it. But that was what I was actually asking you about on Facebook earlier this week, was how do you define reason such that, a course of action, the only course of action that even has a chance of saving everybody's life, is irrational? I mean, what definition of reason came up with that? I mean, I think there's something wrong in the premises there.
Well, I'm not sure I understand your question. Let me rephrase it to see if I have a semblance of it. You're saying that if reason recommends a particular course of action, it can't possibly be unreasonable?
Well, no. I'm saying if you're put in a situation like Galileo 7, where you weigh the options and the option with the highest risk is nevertheless the only strategically sound choice, then how is it unreasonable to take the gamble? I mean, how is that irrational in the first place?
Well, as I recall the show...
Because, I mean, I don't know any rule of logic that says you can't do that.
Well, as I recall from the show, it was an act of desperation.
Yeah.
Which would have been an emotional...
right. Okay, I'm sorry. I guess that's assuming the Vulcan idea that reason excludes emotion or whatever, while I'm sticking with the Earth philosopher idea that reason is a set of rules, or at least the more modernist type idea. I don't know whether the classicists agree with that. Well, Aristotle would have, I think.
We'll have that discussion another time, but I mean,
okay,
the point
sorry.
Is, there was room for an emotional motivation. Say, okay, I can't act according to the rule book. I can't act according to systematic thinking, which says I've got to fly straight towards the Enterprise, and maybe they'll find me, maybe they won't. It's fourth down. I've got to punt. I've really got to go big or go home, and I'm going to create, this flare.
Right.
And the influx or the penetration of desperation into Spock's thinking would have been, I think, unwelcome according to a purely Vulcan or Stoic a philosophy or mindset.
Okay, so so it's not so much that that it's irrational, so much that it is extra rational, I guess.
I don't think you would find it in the Starfleet rulebook, his action.
Sure.
It wasn't, the Newtonian systematic. It wasn't a well-constructed way of doing things. It was simply an attempt to save his life, to do something sensational that's going to register on the Enterprise sensors and burn up their fuel supply in hopes that they get found.
Yeah. Well, I think that was the bit for people who have already read the book and still are interested in our podcast. That was the bit for those folks.
Yeah.
So what are your future plans as an author? You said you were working on Rational God as another book.
Well, yeah, that would be one of them, and that's one that I'm actually working actively on right now, Rational God, where I definitely take the Vulcan way of thinking and I run with it.
Oh.
It's not a Vulcan way of thinking that emotions have to be purged. I think that's too puritanical, but the Vulcan way of thinking in that reason is supreme. Good art is logical art. Good ethics or good actions are reasonable actions, not unreasonable actions.
Yeah.
So rational God, the thesis there is exactly what you're going to find in the chapter on Vulcan religion, where I lay out God as the logos. The
Yeah,
thing that has. Go ahead.
I was going to say, yeah, I remember you citing Immanuel Kant's religion within the limits of bare reason.
Religion within the limits of reason alone. And that, I would say, if somebody's curious about my theology, not my philosophy, but where do you stand theologically, I mean, to point them to the Bible just opens up a can of worms. But if I were to put you towards religion within the limits of reason alone, that's it. That covers it. I am a Kantian when it comes to theology. It's brilliant.
I wish I could find a text of that online, because your book has done what Peter Kraft said that good introductory level philosophy books of this kind should always do, and that is act as a matchmaker between the reader and the great, the great books. And
Well,
what I mean by the great books isn't to say that your book isn't great. I mean great with a capital G. I mean,
yeah,
your
I
book
know what you mean.
your book is not intended to be in the same category with, for example, the book by Kant we were just discussing.
No, it's not.
And
No.
so you're doing a great job, even if all you were to do was to provide people an introduction that shows them, where they need to go next, in the great books. And so that's actually a real compliment, my saying that reading your book has made me really want to get in a text of that. I just can't seem to find it online anywhere.
Well, to me, that's what good philosophy is, because I think a lot of the important ideas have already been said. And so if I talk about the logos or ethics or the nature of the soul, gee, I want to know more. Yeah, I think there is a mathematical structure of the universe. Why is it structured analytically? Well, tell me more. And then you've got Plato's Dialogue, the Timaeus, you've got Thomas Aquinas, you've got a whole slew of philosophers that you can go to that I try to reference. And so what my book isn't to be, the 1,200-page monster that you're going to find in the City of God and Augustine, or Summa Theologica, or the intellectually intense religion within the limits of reason alone. It's meant to be a key that will unlock that door, and that people can walk through and say, okay, I'm vaguely familiar with what Plato is saying. Now I can investigate a little bit further. And it's because there's an interest in Star Trek where you explain the idea in terms of a story that they enjoyed watching at some point. The book is enjoyable, and now they can enjoy the thought once they're done. And they can go investigate further. That's what I was trying to get done. And if it's a Kraft, if that's his goal, well, I'm in very good company.
Yeah, it
I would
reminds me of what.
recommend,
Oh, sorry.
when you go back and revise this book and release a second edition of it, and you will, so you can add in the what does God need with the starship.
I will.
You will also add in at the end for further reading and lots of suggestions for other philosophical
Yeah,
books.
add an appendix that helps people know where to go. That'd be a great thing to add.
Well,
I don't know. Half the fun is finding it just from I mean, he names references, and half the fun is finding it for yourself. If somebody gives you all the references yourself, you're going to end up just.
No.
I've never once picked up.
Person's not going to buy a book just to look at the references at the end of the book. They're going to read that book.
I mean, this book itself is
but
one.
But it's also
that's
nice to have a handy list at the end after you read the book.
You know what? I hate to confess this, but I think I did do that once.
Did you?
Yeah, there was a book that was so well referenced. It had all these other great books in it that I wanted to get from the library and it was like $1 at a book sale. I was like, oh, I need to get this just because I don't want to lose all these references are here written down for me, I am
Wow.
such a nerd. Anyway, I was gonna say, what you say sort of echoes C.S. Lewis's point on basically his definition or theory of originality. He says, and I think this speaks to what your book is doing. That you don't really develop any truly original thesis, but Anyway, he says, even in literature and art, no man who bothers about originality will ever be original. Whereas if you simply try to tell the truth without caring twopence how often it has been told before, you will, 9 times out of 10, become original without ever having noticed it.
Well,
I
go ahead.
think you do that.
Yeah, I'm not sure how original any of the philosophy was, but that's exactly what I was going for. Okay, we've got all these ideas from ancient philosophy and ancient thinkers and the giants upon which our civilization is built. And I communicate them through something that the four of us really love, and that's Star Trek. And that's exactly what I was going for. I'm just going to communicate old ideas.
Well, I think you definitely succeeded on that point there. And everybody listening to this podcast needs to go right now, well, after the podcast, needs to go to Amazon.com, search for Faith in the Final Frontier, and buy it immediately. It's only 99 cents in US coin anyway. So, highly recommend that. What was everyone's favorite part of the book?
Oh, yeah.
Bill?
Well, like I was saying earlier, I mean, I liked all these little essays. I liked how they're short and sweet and to the point. It helps a guy like me that can't take the time to chew on deep philosophy. My favorite essay was the Galileo 7 and Pascal's Wager, a new perspective on a classic episode.
That was one of my favorites, too.
I liked the bit where you were dissing Nietzsche.
Which one was that? That was throughout the whole book.
Well,
Yeah.
Well, I meant the bit where you compared Nietzsche with Ducat.
Well, it was a fair comparison.
Yeah, no, I think.
I thought it was a fair comparison. And as a matter of fact, when I was...
Sorry.
Go ahead, Ben.
Oh, well, you ought to finish that. I was just going to say, I was kind of hoping you'd develop your Nietzschean case for Christianity you referenced on an episode one time in this book, but it doesn't seem to really come out.
Well, that can be in the second edition. But go ahead, Kirby.
Well, it won't even be in the second edition. That would be like a brief article. You can't get enough pro-Christian thought from Nietzsche to make a book out of it. The most you could do in terms of quote mining and totally butchering his philosophy would be an article. I fully intend to write that article at some point.
Well, I definitely sent it to me. I want to hear that because that just seems so counterintuitive. Anyway, so go ahead. Sorry about.
Well, one of the concerns that I had when I was writing Nietzsche's criticism of Christianity, in terms of Christianity largely being a facade, producing people who really aren't what they truly are, was that I was making the case too strongly. I'm glad you enjoyed the criticism. I was actually worried my criticism wasn't strong enough. I mean, the criticism was Kai Wynn wound up in hell, engulfed in flames, dead. And she sought power, but she didn't seek it properly. She wasn't humble. She abandoned her humility or professed humility and didn't get what she was wanting. And I was worried that that didn't come across strong enough and that people who were reading the book actually was, wow, maybe I'm actually a Nietzschean. So I'm really glad to hear you enjoyed the criticism. I was worried it was too far the other way.
Well, I think after being prepared for that with the whole Milton thing earlier, I think people might have connected the dots and realized if you made Kai Wynn overly sympathetic for a moment, you were doing it because you were emulating your hero Milton there.
Well, he's not my hero, but...
Well, he sure came off as your hero.
Did he?
Well, yeah, you seem to be a real Milton fanboy based on that earlier stuff about the better to reign in hell stuff.
Well, I knew I thought favorably of him. Chris, what was your favorite book? I'm curious. Chris McGee,
well-
you've got the whole library of human intellect on your iPad.
Yeah, it's a wonderful thing. Well, besides the dedication, I actually like the, as silly as it is, the chapter and section titles. You know, I need my pain. I just love scanning for life forms. And the Vulcan Science Directorate has determined this chapter is impossible.
Yeah,
We shall sing the songs of this chapter. I loved that.
Yes, that was.
I wrote those probably in about, I'd say, 3 minutes. And
Yeah.
I was just, I don't want to say I was in the zone. I probably wasn't, but I was
It looks like
laughing
you
the whole
started
time.
out of the zone and got into the zone, and that's come with more clever
It's
ones.
The chapter titles are one of my favorite.
Somebody needs to write a philosophy of the zone. They probably already have, and they just call it psychology. Never mind. Anyway,
You know, that's
But I-
going to come back and haunt you, because when you come up with a follow-up to this, people are going to say, hey, where's the wacky chapter titles?
Oh yeah. Well,
And if you forget to add the wacky chapter titles,
well, we already have one form. What does God need with a starship? Ben, you had a
there you
quick
go.
question you wanted to ask Brandon about the bookmaking process.
oh yeah, like how do you get? This is just an ebook.
Yeah, this is something that our listeners might actually be interested in. I don't know.
I mean, is this is just an ebook, or do you have any print run of it at all?
Yeah. There's going to be a print run of it. As a matter of
Good.
fact, by the time this gets posted, Chris, I don't know when you're planning on posting this, but the truth is, I expect that to happen within the next 2 weeks. That you'll be able to order a print copy of the book. I mean, my goal, my Walter Mitty moments, is that some Christian bookstores would pick it up by the release of the next Star Trek movie, trying to capitalize on that popularity. I don't think it will happen, but
it couldn't hurt. Is there a
Yep.
particular publisher you're using for the hardcover edition that you'd like to mention? Just give them a little shout out or whatever.
well, they don't need a show. It's Amazon. You can. It's entirely possible to publish a book via Amazon now. It's very
Wow.
simple.
Oh,
There's
they
nothing
do.
to-
How,
I didn't
so
know
how
that.
do
Publishing
you?
too?
How
I thought
do
you were using Lulu or something like that.
I want to know, how do you get from a point of I want to write a book and I come up with my what's the word, manuscript? How do you get from that to buy my book?
Well, you've got to be a real idiot not to be able to do that. Amazon has laid things out so easily.
I think you
So
just
neat.
said something about you, Ben.
Well, I haven't had a manuscript that that's ever been complete enough or happy enough for me to face this problem. Partly because I've always assumed that there was, a gatekeeper of the traditional publishing industry, and
Well, there
so
is.
You're thinking of the old publishing methods, probably.
yeah, and so I'm wanting to know, like, can you give us just a basic concept of this brave new world of no gatekeeper publishing?
What you do on Amazon, there's an option for self-publish with us, and you click on the link. It's you can't do it nonchalantly. You've got to be serious about it. You've got to actually follow the process that they lay out for you, and it takes some time, but it's very easily done. They send you emails saying this is where you're at in your publishing stage. Your interior has been reviewed properly. You design the cover. You can pay to have other people do the design for you, to do the editing for you, which I suspect you three gentlemen might have suggested I would have made a wise investment if I had done that. You can do all those sorts of things. It really is the click of a button. And it would have been nice to have a professional publishing house pick up my book. That would have been the ideal. But be that as it may, that wasn't going to happen. I put the idea out to a couple of publishing houses, especially well, it's Star Trek movies coming out. You really might do well here. And the first couple I sent out didn't really bite, and I understand that's quite normal.
Yeah.
Then I just saw the option self-publish. And I said, well, you know what? I don't want to sit on another book that's going to be in my hard drive for the next couple of years. I could actually publish something. I can actually point people to something and say, well, you can get this. I actually want to say I'm out there, put myself out there for people's consumption and reflection and hopefully rejection. They can tell me where I went wrong.
I think that's brilliant.
Yeah, it's
So
not that difficult.
Kind of steps you through it, walks you through the process.
If you're intelligent enough to write a half-decent book, then you're intelligent enough to click on self-publish.
Well, does it cost like upfront money to have them try and do this? I mean,
not much. I wouldn't have spent more
You
than
just get the
$100.
residuals, right? Or
Yeah, I just get commission off the book.
Commission.
Not much. Amazon takes an unholy amount, and I'm not complaining. They've done the book. They deserve every penny they get.
well, I will definitely encourage people to buy the print version myself.
oh, as soon as it's available in print, I will get it in print.
Yeah.
My profit margins are higher on the ebook, but if you buy a physical copy of the book, I make a little bit more money. The thing is, who picks up a book for $9.99?
I will.
Hardly any.
I want to show Mom my name in print,
Yeah, but if you pick up a book for 99 cents, a lot of people have nothing about putting 99 cents to a credit card. That's nothing.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
That's a song.
I suspect. Yeah, I know exactly. It's nothing. 99 cents. Who doesn't have 99 cents? If you don't have 99 cents, you're not surfing the internet. So.
That's all the time we have for tonight, folks. We'd like to thank our special guest, author B.T. Kirby, for joining us. And we'd like to thank all of you for tuning in. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, send us emails at trekosophy@gmail.com. Tune in next week for more exciting adventures, and don't forget to check out Faith and the Final Frontier, available at amazon.com.
And always put lots of F's in your titles. You said a boot again.
A boot? Oh,
Sorry.
wear flannel too.
Yeah, it's like there was no mention of Data's cat, but your cat gets a mention. You gotta do something about that cat.
Well, boy, would I like to do something about that cat. I got a cat person. I got a fire going, so you're giving me ideas, bro. It took about. It did take some research.
It took a boot.
A boat. Actually, he's saying a boat, not a boot. But anyway, let him finish.
Okay, I'm sorry. It just seemed like you were doing it again. Okay, I'm sorry.
Why does me being Canadian come up on every single show? There's not a huge difference between Canada and American culture.
I just think a boot just got so funny. Okay, I'm sorry.
I'll tell you one
Right.
thing: Canadian beer sucks.
Well, if we do that though, Bill, we're taking a risk, and risk is our business.
Well, Shatner was Canadian, so it makes sense that Brandon would do that. And I've got to stop Canadian bashing. I know I'm offending our neighbors to the
I
north.
don't know why.
Kirby's just getting slammed.
I don't know why it keeps coming up. I just.
I'm Canadian. That's why
realize-
it's coming up.
I didn't even realize it was that bad until the blooper reel show, and there was like 5 straight minutes of me going, well, he's a Canadian. Those damn Canadians. Canadian. I'm like, holy crap, what's wrong with me?
I've been excommunicated. Mr. Kirby, please.
Well, you're the author. You got to be Mr. Kirby.
You can call me Professor Kirby.
BT.
That's just perfect. I'm okay with it.
Oh, please, please. don't call me Mister. We're all friends here. Just call me Professor Kirby. Yeah.
Well,
Exactly.
God
Yeah.
works.
Give it a God works. Just call me Your Holiness. I'm fine.
What
with
does
that.
God
That's-
need with a podcast?
Just
I get into a book and I tear it apart. There are a handful of books that have given me trouble getting started. Grapes of
But-
Wrath. Too many apostrophes.
It's Malcolm X who's upset with me. It's his family that's suing me.
You're being.
Oh, right. I'm sorry.
wait,
I
what?
thought you were saying Bill's quote was from Malcolm X somehow.
I'm just envisioning Bill's face right now. Say, what? Priceless, man.
Where am I?
Where was I?
Did he grow a goatee or something? What's going on? Apparently, you're like in a legal showdown with Malcolm X's family. I mean,
I am those rat bastards.
you got little X and what are they doing living in New York, in Indiana? Is that where Malcolm
Well,
X is from?
No, but goodness gracious, if Malcolm X were alive today, I'd whip it out and piss all over him. I'll tell you what the situation is.
Well, it's like that time when Brandon's microphone had that episode where it sounded like he got beamed up.
I had no idea what you
And
guys
now
were
you've
talking
heard it, so now you didn't know what we were
I
laughing
think-
about.
Well, I watched the blooper reel. Like, holy what happened to Kirby? I am Kirby.
And the way he puts it, I'm getting sued by America. It's like, did you think about Obama? Are you a Canadian birther or
did you
something? Why are
Go
you?
under the Statue of Liberty and take naughty pictures?
Okay.
Tired of reading the same old Kindle thing? Act now for only $9.99 and you can have faith in the final frontier. But wait, there's more. Operators are standing by.
What's a poke between truckers?
All right, I'll go ahead and slot that in on our document.
That seems like it's a Trekosophy episode that is pregnant with entire cities of babies of philosophy ideas for the episode to talk
It's
about.
fucking Gideon is what it is. Well, if you have read the book, you probably know I'm not qualified to participate.
Yeah, I don't have those kind of friends in real life. The kind
And if
that
they're
would be
not a
interested
Star
in
Trek
going
friend,
back.
they're not a real friend. That's
Well, no.
friends
they
help
can-
you move. Good friends help you move bodies. Real friends help you move your 10-to-1 scale replica model of the Starship Enterprise.
Do you ever watch The Muppets?
Yeah.
Do you remember the part where Kermit the Frog, somebody gave Kermit the Frog, said this is the situation, and he explained it out in great
Thing
detail?
With the
And
watch.
then Kermit the Frog said, you are 100% wrong. Not one thing of what you just said was correct.
Okay. That's great.